I'm Cora Bennett, 22 years old, and last month, my grandfather, William, gifted me his $120 million software company. What should have been the happiest day of my life quickly turned into a nightmare when my mother, Elizabeth, and her new husband, Charles, tried to steal it all away. I never imagined my own mother would betray me, especially after everything Grandpa had done for us. But when she forced me to choose between my inheritance and my home, Grandpa chuckled in a way that sent chills down Charles's spine. If you're watching this, please hit subscribe and let me know where you're tuning in from. I promise this roller coaster of family betrayal, corporate scheming, and sweet justice is worth every minute. To understand why Grandpa William made me his successor, you need to know our family history. I was raised primarily by my grandfather after my dad, William's only son, died in a car accident when I was 10. My mother, Elizabeth, was devastated at first, but within a year, she was more interested in her social life than raising a grieving child. Your mom processes grief differently. Grandpa would explain whenever I'd cry after Elizabeth missed another school event. He never spoke ill of her, but his eyes held disappointment. William Bennett was a legend in the software industry. He started Bennett Solutions in his garage in the early 80s with nothing but determination and a brilliant mind. By the time I was born, the company was worth millions, and by my high school graduation, it had expanded internationally with a valuation of over $100 million. Despite his success, Grandpa remained humble and hardworking. Money doesn't define character. Cora, he'd tell me, actions do. After Dad died, I spent weekends and most summers at Grandpa's estate, while other kids my age were at the mall or pool parties. I was shadowing William through the halls of Bennett Solutions, absorbing everything I could about the business. By 16, I was helping with basic market research. By 18, I was sitting in on development meetings. The employees watched me grow up, and many became like family. I majored in business administration with a minor in computer science at Stanford. Working at the company every summer, Grandpa never pressured me to join the family business, but he beamed with pride when I expressed interest in it. You've got your father's mind and my stubbornness. He'd say, that's a powerful combination. Meanwhile, my mother Elizabeth cycled through a series of increasingly questionable boyfriends. Elizabeth was beautiful and charming when she wanted to be, but she had terrible taste in men. After my father, she seemed drawn to men who were his opposite: flashy, irresponsible, and often opportunistic. Then came Charles Thompson. He entered our lives 6 months ago when my mother brought him to a family dinner. Charles was different from her usual type. He was a former sales manager at CodeWave, one of our competitors, polished and articulate. He charmed my mother completely, what Elizabeth didn't see. But Grandpa and I immediately noticed was the calculating look in his eyes as he surveyed our home, asked pointed questions about the company, and seemed more interested in Grandpa's business connections than in building a relationship with us. I don't trust that man. Grandpa told me privately after dinner. He's not here for Elizabeth, but my mother was infatuated. Within 3 months, they were married in a lavish ceremony that Charles somehow convinced Elizabeth to pay for entirely. I stood beside her as maid of honor, forcing a smile while watching Charles's eyes constantly wander to the wealthy guests Grandpa had invited. After the wedding, Charles quit his job, claiming he wanted to focus on being a family man. He began appearing at company functions uninvited, introducing himself as part of the Bennett family business. Employees would call me confused after he requested confidential reports or tried to sit in on strategy meetings. During this time, Grandpa's health began declining. He'd never fully recovered from a heart attack 2 years prior, and the stress of watching Charles circle his life's work like a vulture wasn't helping. I began taking on more responsibility at the company, learning everything I could from Grandpa while we still had time. I'm not worried about the company. Cora, he told me one evening as we reviewed quarterly reports in his home office, I'm worried about you and your mother when I'm gone. I assured him I could take care of myself. But we both knew Elizabeth was vulnerable to manipulation, especially from men like Charles, who seemed to have an uncanny ability to identify and exploit her insecurities. What I didn't know then was that Grandpa had already set a plan in motion, one that would force all of us to show our true colors. My 22nd birthday arrived on a perfect September Saturday. Grandpa had insisted on hosting a small gathering at his estate, though his idea of small included 50 guests. The sprawling garden was decorated with twinkling lights, and a jazz quartet played near the pool. The guest list included family members, close friends, and several key executives from Bennett Solutions. Elizabeth and Charles arrived fashionably late, my mother stunning in a designer dress that probably cost more than most people's monthly salary. Charles wore a custom suit and that practiced smile that never quite reached his eyes. Happy birthday. Darling, Elizabeth air-kissed both my cheeks. You look lovely. Don't you think she looks lovely? Charles nodded, his eyes already scanning the crowd for important business contacts. Very nice. Is that David Lee from Tech Venture Capital here? I bit back a retort about his priorities and instead thanked them for coming. Throughout the evening, I noticed Charles cornering various executives, engaging in conversations that made them look increasingly uncomfortable. My cousin Emily pulled me aside after escaping one such interaction. Your stepdad just asked me how much I thought Uncle William was worth in total. She whispered, like, who asks that around 9 o'clock? Grandpa called for everyone's attention by tapping his glass. The crowd quieted as he made his way to the center of the patio, leaning slightly on his cane. Despite his physical frailty, his voice remained strong and commanding. First, let's all wish my beautiful granddaughter a happy birthday. He began, leading the crowd in a chorus of happy birthday. I blushed, standing beside him as everyone cheered. Cora has been the light of my life since the day she was born. Grandpa continued. After we lost her father, my son, she became even more precious to me. His voice wavered slightly, and I squeezed his hand. Today, I want to make an announcement, he said, straightening his shoulders. After 50 years at the helm of Bennett Solutions, I've decided it's time for me to retire. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. This was news to everyone, including me. I looked at him in surprise, but he just winked at me. A company needs young blood, new ideas, and unwavering integrity to thrive in today's market. I've been blessed to watch Cora grow into a brilliant, hardworking young woman who understands not just the business, but the heart and soul of Bennett Solutions. My heart began racing as I realized where this was heading, across the garden. I saw Charles suddenly paying very close attention. His conversation abandoned mid-sentence. Therefore, as my birthday gift to Cora, I am transferring majority ownership and control of Bennett Solutions to her. Effective immediately. Gasps and exclamations erupted around us. I stood frozen in shock as Grandpa beamed at me. The company executives who had known me since childhood began applauding, followed quickly by most of the guests. My cousins exchanged glances that mixed surprise with envy, but my focus was drawn to my mother and Charles. Elizabeth's smile was tight, her eyes wide with surprise and something else, anger, confusion. Charles didn't bother hiding his reaction. His face flushed dark red, his jaw clenched so tight I could see a muscle twitching in his cheek. William, this is quite unexpected, Elizabeth said, her voice artificially light as she approached us. Shouldn't we discuss such important family matters privately? Grandpa's smile never faltered. There's nothing to discuss. Elizabeth, the paperwork is already finalized. My lawyers are here with all the documents. On cue, Thomas Carter, Grandpa's attorney for over 30 years, stepped forward with a leather portfolio. Everything is in order. William, we just need Cora's signature to complete the transfer. The next hour passed in a blur. I signed document after document, my hand shaking slightly as the magnitude of what was happening sank in. A $120 million company was now my responsibility. Executives came forward to congratulate me, many with genuine enthusiasm. Your father would be so proud. Laura Kim, our chief technology officer, whispered as she hugged me. Throughout it all, I kept catching glimpses of Charles whispering furiously to my mother, whose celebratory facade was cracking by the minute. I knew they wouldn't let this stand without a fight. But for the moment, I allowed myself to feel the weight and wonder of Grandpa's extraordinary gift. As the party continued around us, Grandpa led me to a quiet corner of the garden. "Are you upset with me for not warning you?" he asked, his eyes twinkling. "Shocked is more like it," I admitted. "Grandpa, are you sure about this? It's your life's work." He took my hands in his. "Cora, I've been preparing you for this your entire life. You understand what Bennett Solutions stands for. It's not just about profits, but about innovation that improves lives. I trust you to carry that forward more than anyone else in the world." His confidence in me brought tears to my eyes. "I won't let you down. I promised." "I know you won't," he said. Then glanced over my shoulder at Charles, who was now at the bar downing his third scotch. "And don't worry about the vultures. I've been dealing with men like him my entire career." The cryptic statement should have been my first clue that Grandpa had anticipated everything that was about to unfold. The last guests departed around midnight, leaving only family in Grandpa's massive house. I was helping the staff clean up in the kitchen when Elizabeth cornered me, Charles looming behind her like a storm cloud. "We need to talk," she said, her voice clipped. "In the study, now." I followed them, sensing the confrontation that had been brewing all evening was about to erupt. Grandpa had retired to his room earlier, citing fatigue from the long evening. Charles closed the study door behind us with unnecessary force. The warm, book-lined room that had always been a sanctuary suddenly felt claustrophobic. "What the hell was that?" Elizabeth demanded, pacing in front of Grandpa's desk, Grandpa's retirement gift. "Apparently," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. "I was as surprised as you." "This is completely irresponsible," Charles interjected, his polished voice abandoned for something harder. "You're barely out of college. You can't possibly run a company of that size." I squared my shoulders. "I've been working at Bennett Solutions since I was 16. I know the company inside and out." Elizabeth waved her hand dismissively. "Working summers while studying is hardly the same as running the entire operation." "Which is why," Charles said, stepping closer, "we've decided that I'll be taking over as CEO while you learn the ropes." The audacity of it stunned me momentarily. "Excuse me, it makes perfect sense," Elizabeth continued, as if they'd rehearsed this. "Charles has executive experience. He'll manage day-to-day operations while you finish your education." "Absolutely not," I said firmly. "Grandpa made me the owner and CEO. The paperwork is signed. It's done." Charles's facade of reasonableness evaporated. "Listen, you entitled little princess. This company needs experienced leadership, not some girl playing businesswoman because Grandpa felt sorry for her." "Charles," Elizabeth exclaimed, though she seemed more concerned with his tone than his content. "No, Elizabeth. She needs to hear this." He snapped. "Your grandfather is a sentimental old man making irrational decisions. The board will never accept you as CEO. They'll laugh you out of the building." My hands trembled with anger, but I kept my voice steady. "The board has known me my entire life. Many of them have already congratulated me and offered their support. Support that will evaporate when they realize you're in over your head." He sneered. "Be reasonable. Cora, let me handle the business aspects. You can keep the title and enjoy the profits." I saw it all clearly then. Charles had been planning this from the beginning: marry my mother, ingratiate himself with Grandpa, position himself to take over the company. He just never expected Grandpa to bypass them both and give everything directly to me. The answer is no, I said firmly. I am the owner and CEO of Bennett Solutions. Grandpa chose me. Not you. Elizabeth's expression hardened. This isn't just about you. Cora, this is about our family's legacy. Charles and I are trying to protect you from making a huge mistake. By stealing my company? I asked incredulously. It's not stealing when it's family. Charles shot back. But if you want to be difficult about this, fine. Here's how it's going to be. Either you accept our help in running the company, or you can pack your bags and leave this house. I stared at my mother, waiting for her to contradict this outrageous ultimatum. She didn't. You'd kick me out because I won't let your husband of 5 minutes take over my inheritance, I asked her. My voice breaking slightly. Elizabeth's eyes flashed. This is my house. 2. Cora. And Charles is my husband. If you can't respect our position in this family, then yes, you should leave. The betrayal cut deep. My own mother choosing this man over me. Fine, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. I'll go. Don't be dramatic. Elizabeth sighed. Just agree to Charles's proposal, and we can all move forward as a family. Some family, I muttered, turning toward the door as I reached for the handle. A low chuckle came from the doorway. We all turned to see Grandpa standing there, still in his party clothes, leaning on his cane, but with a fire in his eyes I hadn't seen in years. Well, he said, his voice deceptively light. Isn't this an interesting family discussion? Charles paled visibly. William, we were just discussing the transition. I heard exactly what you were discussing. Grandpa cut him off. And I must say, Charles, you've shown your hand rather earlier than I expected. Not a patient man. Are you? He stepped into the room, his gaze shifting to my mother. Elizabeth. I'm disappointed, though not surprised. Dad. Please, Elizabeth began, but Grandpa held up his hand. Cora, he said, turning to me. Go pack a bag. Not because you're being kicked out, but because you'll be staying at my guest house tonight. Tomorrow, we implement Plan B. Plan B, Charles echoed, looking worried for the first time. Grandpa's smile was cold. Did you really think I'd hand over my life's work without safeguards against vultures like you? Charles, I've been in business longer than you've been alive. As I left the room, I heard Grandpa say quietly to them both, You've made a serious miscalculation. By morning, you'll understand just how serious. I walked out with tears streaming down my face. But with Grandpa's steady presence behind me, I felt something else. To the first stirrings of a righteous anger that would carry me through what came next. The guest house on Grandpa's property was larger than most people's primary homes. But that night, it felt empty and cold despite its luxury. I barely slept, replaying the confrontation over and over in my mind. By morning, my sadness had hardened into resolve. My mother had made her choice. Now I would make mine. Grandpa arrived at 8 sharp, carrying a thick folder and wearing what his employees called his battle suit. His finest tailored outfit reserved for important negotiations. Sleep well, he asked, knowing full well I hadn't. Not really, I admitted, pouring us both coffee. Good, he nodded, surprising me. Anger and indignation are better fuel than complacency. You'll need that fire today. Over breakfast. Grandpa outlined what had transpired in the 3 weeks since Charles and my mother had returned from their honeymoon. Charles had been systematically meeting with board members, suggesting that Grandpa's health was affecting his judgment. He'd contacted key clients, introducing himself as the future of Bennett leadership. He'd even begun courting a potential buyer for the company, a larger tech firm known for dismantling acquisitions and selling their parts. How do you know all this? I asked, astonished. Grandpa's eyes twinkled. Because I've had him investigated since the day after he proposed to your mother. He slid several photos across the table. Charles meeting with executives from our competitor, Next Gen Tech. Charles looking cozy with a woman who wasn't my mother. Charles shaking hands with Michael Harris, the CEO known for hostile takeovers. Charles Thompson isn't even his real name. Grandpa continued. It's Charles Miller. He's changed identities twice. His specialty is marrying wealthy women, gaining control of their assets, then disappearing with as much as he can liquidate. The revelation stunned me. Does Mom know Grandpa's expression softened? Your mother sees what she wants to see. She always has. He explained that we needed to move quickly, despite the legal transfer of ownership. Charles was already making moves by noon that day. I discovered just how aggressive those moves were. When I arrived at Bennett Solutions headquarters, my access card was denied. The security guard, a new hire who didn't know me, refused to let me in without authorization. I called Laura Kim, our CTO, who came down to vouch for me, looking confused and concerned. There's been a memo, she explained as we rode the elevator to the executive floor. From Charles Thompson, identifying himself as acting CEO by family appointment. It said all executive decisions require his approval pending a board review of the transition. My hands clenched into fists. He has no authority here. Most of us know that, Laura said carefully. But he's got Elizabeth backing him, and he's been very persuasive with some of the newer board members. The situation was worse than I imagined. Charles had commandeered my father's old office, now intended to be mine, and installed himself as if he belonged there when I confronted him. He smiled that practiced smile. Cora, good of you to come in. We need to discuss your role during this transition period. Get out of my office, I stated flatly. His smile hardened. Your mother and I have been talking with several board members. They have concerns about your experience level. Until those are addressed, I'll be overseeing operations. That's not your decision to make. We'll let the board decide at the emergency meeting I've called for tomorrow. He replied smoothly. In the meantime, why don't you shadow some department heads, learn the business properly? I was being treated like an intern in my own company. When I tried to access the executive computer system, I found my credentials had been restricted. By mid-afternoon, an email went out to all staff indicating that during the leadership transition, all departmental decisions needed Charles's approval. For 3 days, this nightmarish situation continued. Charles had changed the locks on several offices. Elizabeth was calling board members, expressing concerns about my emotional stability. Rumors spread that I was being sidelined due to inexperience or even substance abuse problems. Several employees who expressed support for me found themselves assigned to undesirable projects. I was staying at Grandpa's guest house, unable to return to my mother's home, where I'd been living since college, each night. I came back defeated and furious. Each morning, Grandpa would calmly ask, "Are you ready to fight back yet on the 4th day?" I finally broke down. They're winning. Grandpa, he's turning everyone against me. Even people who've known me my whole life are starting to doubt me. Grandpa set aside his newspaper and looked at me intently. Are you finished feeling sorry for yourself? His bluntness surprised me. What, Cora? Did you think taking over a $120 million company would be easy? That everyone would just accept a 22-year-old woman as their boss without testing her? This isn't just about Charles. This is your first leadership challenge. He leaned forward. How you respond now will define your entire career. You can surrender to a con man, or you can stand up and prove why I chose you. His words stung, but they also ignited something in me. What's plan B? I finally asked. Grandpa smiled, not his kind grandfather's smile, but the shark-like grin that had made him a legend in business. I thought you'd never ask. That afternoon, Grandpa revealed that the ownership transfer documents contained several conditions that neither Charles nor my mother knew about, while I owned 70% of Bennett Solutions. Grandpa had retained 25% himself, with 5% distributed among public shareholders. But the most important clause, he explained, showing me the document, is this one. He pointed to Section 23B, which stated clearly no financial transactions exceeding $10,000, no hiring or firing of executive positions, and no structural reorganization may occur within the first year of transition without the express written consent of both Cora Bennett and William Bennett. He can't access the company funds without us both signing off. I realized precisely. Grandpa nodded. Charles can sit in that office all he wants, but he can't actually do anything that matters. Furthermore, Grandpa had been preparing key executives for months. Laura Kim, our CTO, Robert Hayes, our CFO, and several other longtime employees had been privately assured that I would eventually take over. They had been instructed to appear to comply with Charles while documenting everything he did. The company has been loyal to me for decades. Grandpa explained. Most of the old guard would walk through fire for the Bennett family. They've been waiting to see if you would fight for your inheritance or give up. That night, Grandpa introduced me to Daniel Foster, a corporate attorney who specialized in hostile takeover defenses. Together, we formulated our counterattack. The emergency board meeting Charles called for tomorrow. Daniel smiled. It's the perfect stage for our purpose. As we finalized our strategy, I felt something shift inside me. The hurt and betrayal were still there, but they were now fuel for a determination I hadn't known I possessed. Charles thought he was dealing with an inexperienced girl he could bully and manipulate. He was about to discover how wrong he was. One more thing, Grandpa said as we concluded our planning. Your mother... My jaw tightened. What about her? She's wrong, but she's not evil, he said gently. Charles has manipulated her just as he's tried to manipulate everyone else. Remember that tomorrow. I nodded, though forgiveness felt impossible in that moment. Tomorrow would be about saving my company. Reconciliation with my mother, if possible at all, would have to come later. The boardroom of Bennett Solutions occupied the entire top floor of our headquarters, with floor-to-ceiling windows offering a panoramic view of the city by 9 o'clock in the morning. All 12 board members were seated around the massive oak table, along with key executives and the company's legal team. Charles sat at the head of the table, my grandfather's traditional seat, with my mother beside him. He wore an expensively tailored suit and an expression of practiced concern. I entered with Grandpa and Daniel Foster, our presence clearly unexpected. William. Charles stood, momentarily flustered. We didn't think you'd be joining us, given your health concerns. My health is fine for this, Grandpa replied pleasantly, taking a seat halfway down the table. I sat beside him, with Daniel on my other side. Charles recovered quickly. Well, we're glad you're here. As I was about to explain to the board, we're facing a delicate transition period. While Cora's inheritance is, of course, legally binding, there are serious concerns about placing the entire company under such inexperienced leadership. Several board members nodded, particularly the newer appointees who didn't know our family well. Charles continued, outlining his temporary leadership proposal that would effectively give him control while relegating me to a figurehead position. When he finished, he looked around expectantly. I believe this compromise best serves everyone's interests while ensuring the company's stability. Are there any objections, he asked, his tone suggesting none would be reasonable. Yes, I said clearly. Standing up, I object completely. All eyes turned to me. Charles's smile tightened. Cora, I understand this is emotional for you. This isn't about emotions, I interrupted. This is about facts. Facts that this board needs to be aware of before making any decisions. I nodded to Daniel, who distributed folders to each board member. Inside, you'll find detailed background information on Charles Thompson, or should I say, Charles Miller, The color drained from Charles's face as I continued. You'll find documentation of 3 previous marriages, all to wealthy women. All 3 marriages ended within 2 years, with Charles walking away with substantial assets. You'll also find evidence of his meetings with our competitors and potential buyers for Bennett Solutions. Board members began murmuring as they flipped through the documents. My mother looked confused, then increasingly horrified as she read, "This is absurd." Charles sputtered, "These are fabrications. Everything is verified by multiple sources." Daniel interjected smoothly, "Including police reports from 2 ex-wives." I pressed on. Charles has been planning this since before he married my mother. His goal was never to help run this company, but to strip its assets and sell what remains to the highest bidder. Laura Kim, our CTO, spoke up. "I can confirm that Mr. Thompson has been accessing confidential product development files without authorization and has contacted at least 3 potential buyers." Robert Hayes, our CFO, added, "He's also requested unusual access to our offshore accounts and asked detailed questions about how quickly certain assets could be liquidated." Charles stood abruptly. "This is a coordinated attack on my character." "Elizabeth, are you going to let them speak about your husband this way?" My mother was staring at the photos in her folder pictures of Charles with another woman just 3 weeks ago. Documentation of money he'd already moved from her personal accounts to his own. Her face was ashen. "Is this true?" she whispered, looking up at him, before Charles could respond. Grandpa cleared his throat. "There's one more matter the board should understand." He nodded to Daniel, who distributed another document. "This is the complete ownership transfer agreement," Grandpa explained. "You'll note Section 23B, which requires dual authorization from both Cora and myself for any significant company decisions during the first year of transition. The board president, Edward Clark, who'd known Grandpa for 30 years, adjusted his glasses as he read. So essentially, Charles has no actual authority to make any of the changes he's proposed. None whatsoever." Grandpa confirmed. "Cora owns 70% of this company. I retain 25%. The remaining 5% is public. Charles owns exactly 0%. Charles's facade cracked completely. "You manipulative old man," he spat. "You set this up from the beginning." "I protected my company and my granddaughter," Grandpa replied calmly. "Something any responsible business owner would do." The meeting dissolved into chaos as Charles continued shouting accusations while board members conferred in shocked whispers. My mother sat frozen, staring at the evidence of Charles's deception. Edward Clark finally called for order. "I believe we've heard enough. This emergency meeting was called to address leadership concerns, and I think those concerns have been thoroughly clarified." He looked around the table. "Unless there are objections, I move that we formally recognize Cora Bennett as CEO of Bennett Solutions, effective immediately, with William Bennett serving in an advisory capacity as specified in their agreement." The vote was unanimous, with even Charles's recent allies abandoning him. As the meeting concluded, Charles stormed toward the door, pausing only to hiss at me. "This isn't over. I'm still married to your mother. I still have leverage." Grandpa overheard and stepped between us. "Actually, Charles, your things have already been removed from Elizabeth's house. The locks have been changed, and divorce papers are being prepared. You might want to check your bank accounts. 2. Any transfers you made from Bennett funds have been frozen pending investigation." For the first time, I saw real fear in Charles's eyes. He looked toward my mother, but she turned away, tears streaming down her face. "Security will escort you out," I said, signaling to the guards waiting outside the boardroom. "Don't bother collecting your office belongings. They've been packed and will be sent to your attorney." As Charles was led away, still protesting, I turned to face the board members and executives who were watching with varying degrees of shock and admiration. "I want to thank you all for your support," I said, surprising myself with how steady my voice sounded. I know many of you have concerns about my experience, and those are valid. I have much to learn, but I was raised in this company. I understand its values and vision, and I promise you I will work harder than anyone to honor my grandfather's legacy while moving Bennett Solutions into the future. One by one, they came forward to shake my hand or offer words of encouragement. Laura Kim hugged me tightly. Your father would be so proud, she whispered. As the boardroom cleared, I was left with Grandpa and my mother, who looked utterly broken. I'm so sorry. Cora, she sobbed. I never imagined he would. I wanted to stay angry, to make her feel the pain of her betrayal. But looking at her now, I saw what Grandpa had tried to tell me. She wasn't evil, just flawed and manipulated by a master con artist. We'll talk later. Mom, I said, neither accepting nor rejecting her apology yet. I think you need some time to process everything. She nodded tearfully and left, escorted by Grandpa's assistant, who would take her home. That was well handled. Grandpa said once we were alone, both Charles and your mother. I sank into a chair, suddenly exhausted. I still can't believe we pulled it off. Grandpa sat beside me. This was just the beginning. Cora. Running this company will mean facing challenges like this regularly, though hopefully not usually from family members. I looked out at the city skyline, the magnitude of my new reality sinking in. I'm scared. Grandpa. He took my hand, his grip still strong despite his age. Good. Fear keeps you sharp. But remember what you did today. Remember how you stood up for yourself and for this company. That's why I chose you, not because you're my granddaughter, but because you have the spine to do what needs to be done. For the first time in days, I smiled a real smile. Not forced or brave, but genuine. So, what's next? Grandpa said, standing up and gesturing to the CEO's office, visible through the glass wall. You move into your office and get to work. You have a company to run. The next 2 weeks were a blur of activity as I officially took the reins of Bennett Solutions, despite the board's formal approval. I knew many employees and clients were taking a wait-and-see approach to my leadership. Charles's brief but destructive presence had sown seeds of doubt that I needed to address immediately. My first official act as CEO was to call an all-company meeting, standing before hundreds of employees in our main auditorium. I felt my heart hammering but kept my voice steady. Many of you have known me since I was a child running through these halls. I began. Others only know me as William's granddaughter. Today, I want to introduce myself properly as your CEO and share my vision for our future together. I outlined my plans for the company, expanding our innovative product lines while strengthening our core services, investing more in research and development, and creating a more inclusive corporate culture. I acknowledged my youth and inexperience directly. I won't pretend to know everything, I told them, but I'm smart enough to listen to the experts in this room, all of you. My grandfather built this company on innovation and integrity. I intend to honor that legacy while bringing fresh perspective to the challenges ahead. The response was cautiously positive, with longtime employees being the first to offer support. I spent the following days meeting with department heads, listening more than talking, and beginning to form relationships that would be crucial to my success. Meanwhile, Charles wasn't going quietly. Despite being barred from company property, he began contacting clients, spreading rumors about instability at Bennett Solutions. Some of our more conservative clients expressed concerns about the family drama affecting their contracts. He's trying to tank our stock price. Grandpa observed when we discussed the situation over dinner. Classic corporate raider tactic: create uncertainty, watch the value drop, then swoop in with buyer allies to save the company. But he can't buy shares, I pointed out. He has no money of his own, and we've frozen everything he took from Mom. Never underestimate a desperate man. Grandpa warned, especially one who's been publicly humiliated. His warning proved prescient. 3 days later, Robert Hayes, our CFO, rushed into my office looking pale. "We have a situation," he said, sliding a tablet across my desk. "NextGen Tech just announced they're launching a hostile takeover attempt. They're offering shareholders a 20% premium on current stock price. NextGen Tech was our main competitor, the same company Charles had worked for before meeting my mother. The connection wasn't coincidental. They've named Charles as a special advisor to their acquisition team." Robert continued, "He's claiming intimate knowledge of our financial vulnerabilities. The news hit like a physical blow. NextGen Tech was larger than us, with deeper pockets. A prolonged takeover battle could drain our resources and distract from our core business. Worse, our public shareholders holding that crucial 5% might be tempted by the premium offer. I called an emergency meeting with our executive team and legal counsel. The mood was grim as we assessed our options. We could implement a poison pill," Daniel suggested, referring to a defensive strategy that would make our shares prohibitively expensive to acquire. "That would protect us temporarily," Laura Kim noted, "but it might also spook investors and clients. It looks desperate." As the discussion continued, I found myself thinking less about corporate strategies and more about Charles himself. What did he really want? Revenge? Certainly, but also money and status. The man had an ego that needed constant feeding. "I have another idea," I said finally. "One that gives Charles exactly what he wants, just not how he expects to get it." The plan came together over the next 48 hours, when NextGen Tech's CEO, Stephen Carter, requested a meeting to discuss their offer. I surprised everyone by agreeing immediately. The meeting was set for Friday morning at our headquarters. Stephen arrived with his team of executives and lawyers, and Charles. Looking smug in his new role as special advisor, I greeted them in our largest conference room, where Grandpa and our executive team waited. Charles's eyes narrowed when he saw my mother was also present, sitting quietly in the corner. "Thank you for coming," I began pleasantly. "Before we discuss your acquisition offer, I thought you might want to see something." I nodded to Robert, who started a video on the large screen. It showed Charles in a hotel bar with Stephen Carter 3 months ago, before Charles had even proposed to my mother. "I can get you inside information on Bennett's new quantum encryption project," Charles was saying on the recording. "William Bennett trusts me. Once I'm married to Elizabeth, it's just a matter of time before I have access to everything." Stephen looked uncomfortable on the recording. "That sounds like corporate espionage. NextGen Tech doesn't operate that way." "Call it what you want." Recorded. Charles shrugged. "I'm offering you their entire R&D roadmap on a silver platter. All I need is a position and a percentage. When this is done." I stopped the video and turned to Stephen. "We have 6 more recordings like this, documenting Charles's attempts to sell confidential information to various competitors. Would you like to see those?" 2. Stephen's face had turned to stone. He turned to Charles. "You told me you had legitimate concerns about Bennett's financial stability. You said nothing about stolen trade secrets." Charles was sweating now. "Stephen, this is obviously doctored. They're desperate. We've already filed criminal complaints for corporate espionage and attempted fraud." I interrupted, sliding a document across the table. "This is a copy for your records, Mr. Carter. We don't believe NextGen Tech authorized Charles's actions, but we wanted you to be fully informed before proceeding with any acquisition discussions. Stephen Carter was a shark in business, but he'd built NextGen Tech with a reputation for aggressive but legal competition. The implications of being associated with corporate espionage clearly alarmed him. Mr. Thompson's advisory role with NextGen Tech is terminated, effective immediately," he announced, standing up. "And I believe we should postpone any acquisition discussions pending internal review." Charles jumped to his feet. "You can't do this. We had an agreement, which you violated by failing to disclose material information." Stephen replied coldly. My legal team will be in touch about potential liability issues. As Next Gen Tech's team filed out, Charles turned on me, his composure completely shattered. You think you've won? This isn't over. I still have copies of confidential documents. I'll sell them to the highest bidder. Actually, you don't. Laura Kim spoke up. Those confidential files you downloaded, we monitored every access. What you have are elaborate fakes we created once we realized what you were doing. Any competitor who acts on that information will be making multi-million-dollar mistakes. Charles's face drained of color as he realized the depth of his miscalculation. Furthermore, my mother said, speaking for the first time as she approached him, the divorce papers have been filed on grounds of fraud. With evidence of your attempts to steal from both me and the company, there will be no settlement. Charles looked frantically around the room, finding no sympathy. This isn't legal. You can't frame me like this. Frame you? I asked innocently. Every recording we have shows you willingly attempting to commit crimes. Every document was accessed using your credentials. Every conversation happened exactly as we've presented it. Grandpa finally spoke, his voice quiet but carrying the weight of decades of authority. You tried to steal my granddaughter's birthright and my daughter's trust. Did you really think I wouldn't protect them? Security entered then, accompanied by 2 police officers. Charles Thompson, one officer said. We have a warrant for your arrest on charges of attempted corporate espionage and fraud. As Charles was led away in handcuffs, still protesting his innocence. The room fell silent. The confrontation we'd been building toward for weeks was over, ending not with a corporate takeover, but with Charles's complete defeat. My mother approached me hesitantly. Cora, I don't expect forgiveness. But I cut her off with a hug, surprising both of us. The anger I'd been carrying wasn't gone, but seeing her stand up to Charles had reminded me that she was a victim. 2. We'll work on it. Mom, I said quietly, one day at a time, looking around at our executive team, people who had taken a chance on supporting a 22-year-old CEO. I felt a surge of determination. Now, let's get back to work. We have a company to run. As everyone filed out. Grandpa remained, watching me with that mixture of pride and assessment I'd come to recognize. Well done. He said simply, you didn't just protect the company. You did it in a way that strengthened your position with the board, our employees, and even our competitors. I sank into a chair, the adrenaline of the confrontation finally ebbing. I learned from the best. Grandpa smiled. No. Cora, you're doing things your own way. And that's exactly as it should be. 3 months after the dramatic showdown with Charles, I was settling into my role as CEO of Bennett Solutions. The transition hadn't been perfect. I'd made my share of rookie mistakes and faced skepticism from industry analysts who questioned whether a 22-year-old could effectively lead a $120 million company. But with each passing week, I grew more confident in my decisions and earned the respect of employees who saw my commitment to learning and listening. Charles's legal troubles had mounted quickly. After his arrest, investigators discovered evidence of similar schemes with 2 other wealthy families in different states. He was now facing multiple fraud charges and would likely spend several years in prison. The scandal had made business news briefly, but our transparent handling of the situation had actually enhanced Bennett Solutions' reputation for integrity. My relationship with my mother was healing slowly. The betrayal had cut deep. But as Grandpa had predicted, she wasn't malicious, just deeply flawed and easily manipulated by someone who had studied her vulnerabilities. She had entered therapy to understand her pattern of destructive relationships and was making genuine efforts to rebuild our trust. I've been a terrible mother, she admitted during a difficult dinner conversation at my new apartment. I put my needs ahead of yours so many times. Not always, I reminded her, recalling moments of genuine connection from my childhood, but often enough that it became a pattern. She nodded sadly. I'm trying to understand why. My therapist thinks I've been trying to fill the void your father left with men who could never possibly measure up. It wasn't an excuse, but it was an explanation that helped me begin to forgive her. We agreed to weekly dinners, neutral territory, where we could slowly rebuild what had been broken. At the company, I was implementing changes that honored Grandpa's legacy while moving us forward. Our first major product launch under my leadership, an enhanced cybersecurity platform that had been in development for years, exceeded sales projections by 30%. I had championed a more aggressive marketing approach that Grandpa had initially questioned but ultimately supported. Innovation isn't just about products, I told him as we celebrated the successful launch. It's about how we present ourselves to the world. Grandpa's health had improved dramatically once the stress of Charles's machinations was removed, though officially retired. He still came to the office 3 days a week, offering guidance when asked, but increasingly stepping back to let me lead. "You know what makes me happiest?" he said one evening as we reviewed quarterly reports in his home study. "Watching you make decisions I wouldn't have made, good decisions that never would have occurred to me. That's when I know I made the right choice." 6 months after taking control, I called the executive team together to present my comprehensive vision for Bennett Solutions' future. The strategy involved expanding into emerging markets, investing heavily in artificial intelligence research, and establishing a foundation to support STEM education for underprivileged students. Bennett Solutions was built on the belief that technology should improve lives. I told them, I want us to double down on that mission, not just through our products, but through our corporate citizenship. Laura Kim, who had become a valuable mentor, smiled approvingly. "William built a great company," she said, "but I think you might build a greater one." That evening, I hosted a dinner at my apartment for the core team that had stood by me during the crisis. Grandpa, Laura, Robert, Daniel, and a few other key allies. As we enjoyed dessert on my balcony overlooking the city, I raised a toast. "To all of you who believed in me when you had every reason to doubt," I said. "I wouldn't be here without your support." "To Cora," Grandpa countered, raising his glass higher, who proved she didn't need anyone's support, but earned it anyway. Later, as guests were leaving, my mother arrived unexpectedly. She had not been invited, understanding that these business relationships were still too new and fragile to complicate with family drama, but she came bearing news that couldn't wait. "The divorce is final," she announced, showing me the papers. "And I've decided to donate the settlement money to a foundation for victims of financial fraud." It was a small step, but a meaningful one the first time I could remember my mother putting others before herself. The gesture didn't erase the past, but it opened a door to a different future for our relationship. After everyone left, Grandpa lingered, looking out at the city lights from my balcony. "What are you thinking about?" I asked. "Joining him." "Your father," he admitted. "He would have been so proud of the woman you've become." The mention of my dad brought unexpected tears. I still miss him every day. "As do I," Grandpa said softly. "But I see him in you, his integrity, his creativity, and I see your grandmother's strength, too." He turned to face me fully. "When I gave you the company, it wasn't just because you're family. It was because you embody the best of all of us, plus something entirely your own." The journey from that birthday party to this moment had been difficult and painful, but standing there with my grandfather, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't experienced in months. The betrayal had forced me to grow up faster than I'd expected, to find strength I didn't know I possessed, and to truly understand the responsibility that came with my inheritance. The most important lessons I've learned, I reflected, are the ones you can't teach in business school. Trust your instincts, but verify everything. Prepare for betrayal without becoming cynical. Stand your ground, even when it means standing alone. Grandpa nodded. And perhaps the most important family isn't just about blood, but about who stands beside you when it matters most. As he left that night, I sat alone, Looking out at the city where Bennett Solutions had become a respected name, my grandfather had given me more than a company. He had given me the opportunity to discover who I really was and what I was capable of achieving. The road ahead wouldn't be easy. I would make mistakes, face new challenges, and continue to encounter skepticism. But I now knew with certainty that I was where I belonged, doing exactly what I was meant to do. Have you ever faced betrayal from someone you trusted? How did you handle it? And what did you learn from the experience? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments. If this journey resonated with you, please subscribe to hear more life lessons from unexpected places. And remember, sometimes the people who try to limit you are the ones who show you just how limitless you truly are. Thank you for listening, and I wish you the strength to stand firm in your own moments of truth. Through the pain of my mother's betrayal and Charles's deception, I learned that true strength isn't just standing your ground. It's knowing when to trust, when to verify, and how to rise above cynicism to lead with integrity.